Everybody good? Good. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. We called a press conference to respond to some of the things that were said yesterday, our position on a few things. I'm going to read an initial statement. I'm going to go back to the statement, answer any questions. Brian Bentley from the FOP, that represents the supervisors, also here, and he'll take any questions and make a statement. On November 29th, our officers were involved in a vehicle pursuit and the use of deadly force that was provoked by two individuals that had no regard for public safety and exhibited violence towards law enforcement that inevitably led to their own deaths. The events of that night are a tragedy to the families of the deceased suspects and to the officers involved. That pursuit that took place throughout the city streets and the deadly force that was used could have been avoided if the suspects would have just stopped. We're not here if they just would have stopped. Melissa Williams and Timothy Russell chose not to only endanger their own lives, but the lives of the police officers involved and the public. Attorney General Mike DeWine, DCI, East Cleveland, the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department, did a thorough investigation that revealed the officers' actions and their perceptions of the event that happened that night. The officers that were involved in the chase maintained professionalism and a constant concern for public safety. This was evident in the pursuit when no other civilians or police officers were harmed throughout the chase. It has been questioned why so many police vehicles were involved in the car chase and why so many officers did not request permission to enter the vehicle pursuit. The facts that an unusual circumstance grant the right for police officers to use multiple cars in the vehicle pursuit. Officers were pursuing a vehicle that was perceived to have fired a shot at police officers. That was an unusual circumstance and also an active shooter by the officers' perceptions. When a vehicle pursuit begins, all available units respond. Officers assisting in pursuits maintain radio silence for officer safety. Assisting officers allow the lead cars to broadcast in case of any split decisions that had to be made. Officers do not always ask to join into the car chase because they are unable and are concerned for fellow officers' safety. These officers should be commended for their actions. They displayed professionalism by utilizing their training, experience, and means that they had available to them in keeping the public safe. The Chief of Police is conducting an administrative review of these officers involved in the pursuit with a panel that was made up by the Chief of Police. I am disappointed by the premature judgment of the panel that has been made regarding the situation to appease the public without knowing the facts. Our supervisors and officers have already been told, prior to any facts going to the panel, that they would be facing termination, demotion, and suspensions. The Chief of Police has been disappointed from the beginning of this incident. The focus was on the shooting, and since now that the investigation pointing to it being justified, the focus is now on the chase and the policy violations. This was a perfect chase. For 25 minutes, our police officers were able to keep the public safe, have no property damage, and bring the chase to a close without any officers' injuries. Since stop sticks and a helicopter were not available, they did this with as many units as they could muster. An absolutely commendable job of individual thinking, blocking intersections along the route, notifying the public of the chase coming through, and clearing the way for people who had no concern for anyone's else safety. Right now, morale is an all-time low. At the events of November 29, 2012, our members no longer have the confidence in our chief's ability to lead, which we are requesting for him to resign.
The mayor says that he supports the chief and will not ask for his resignation. What would you
the mayor's the boss, and he's going to keep the chief in there, but we're disappointed, our morale's down. It's my job to say to everybody, I get officers right now, second guessing because they don't feel like they're being, supported by the administration.
Yesterday, Mike DeWine said that 59 of the cars did not have permission to be there, in essence violating the city's pursuit policy. What is your reaction to that?
These car chases happen all over. There's 2 or 3 lead cars that are in the lead there, and for an officer to take time to get permission throughout the chase takes up airtime. I think Mike DeWine also said that, it's a split decision, a split-second decision. Well, we don't know when this car chase is going in. We want these lead cars to be able to talk throughout the whole time and tell us where they're going, what's happening, and we want to be right there when the incident's over. This is common. This happens, I think even the chief said this morning, this is common. These things happen in every car chase. And it's important for the public to know that it's our officer safety. We're going home that night. And if we start talking, something goes bad with that lead car, you're going to feel bad that you're breaking in that radio transmission while that car's going.
Is the radio system effective, or is it antiquated, and did that play a role in what happened?
Well, it's antiquated. I remember years ago, you were able to push a button, right, Charlie? A button, you'd be able to get multiple channels. So it's an old system, it's not updated. I understand the policy of going to the channel that was, the chase was going on channel 2. But if you had that one button, if it was still working, it was an updated system, you could have patched in 2, 3, 4, 5 districts at one time. Everybody would have known at that time what's going on.
So what role did it play, if you could explain that to the public?
The role?
The role of the radio system in this whole thing.
I'm not understanding.
Basically, the Attorney General felt that the radio system, lack of communication, was part of this failure. What is your reaction to that?
Well, all the cars that ended up into the school, except for 1 or 2 3rd district cars, but the majority also are all from the 2nd district. The majority of cars that started chase all ended up into the school. The radio system, it'd be nice to patch in a couple districts by one press of the button.
Well, it is true that some supervisors did call off some officers, but they were not on the District 3 channel when they called them off, so they didn't stop. So what you're saying is, with that button that you could patch in everything and just have one main channel, that would be better, and that might have pulled some people off of this, right?
Yeah, and if it was an updated system, I would hope you would have something like that. For an officer to switch, if you have the 3rd district officer involved in chase, you're going to have 1 4 1 2, the radio on 3. That's a perfect world, but you're also watching traffic, you're listening to what's going on with the radio, and there's a lot of things going through a police officer's mind going into these chases. You've got to watch the public, you've got to, you're listening to any fatal incident that's going to happen in the end. You have a lot to concentrate on.
The mayor made it clear yesterday, that he gives all the resources to the police officers when they ask. Would you agree with that?
DeWine also said that the policies have to be in place, there has to be training on them, and they have to be followed. It sounds like what you're saying, and what your release is saying, that it's okay to disregard that policy if you guys feel a fellow officer is in danger, or the public's in danger. Is that what you're saying, is that it's okay for officers to disregard the policy if they think that's the right thing to do?
Well, in our policy, there's an unusual circumstance, and I have not heard yet what that, nobody has defined that. A police officer being shot at, a bank being robbed, a citizen being robbed, a police officer getting shot, and, I think those are all unusual circumstances where we're allowed to go pursue these, we should be able to go pursue the suspect and bring him to justice.
With as many cars as you guys think are necessary?
Well, it's many cars. I think when you look at Officer Taylor, he got shot in the vest. 77 cars responded to him in that scene. Now, if the suspect would have gotten in the vehicle, you're damn right there's going to be 70, 80, 90 cars, going after that car. And it also goes for a citizen. If there's a robbery in place with a gun and there's innocent victims out there, and the police get up there and they're chasing somebody, and they go citywide, every car's going. Yes, we go for our police officers, we want to make sure we all go home safely, but we're also doing it for the citizens too.
Jeff, the report makes the case, though, that response, and obviously driven by the emotion and, justified it, so. But you show up, and that overwhelming response created backlighting, flooding, floodlight problems, and crossfire. So isn't that a case that overwhelming response potentially hurt the officers?
Yeah, but there weren't, in the parking lot, there weren't 50, or what's the number, 59 cars in the parking
No,
lot.
but it didn't matter, because they said those circumstances were created, where officers have a hard time seeing in those crossfire.
They were created by the cars. There were 13 officers. I figured there were 7 cars. 7 cars, right? Yeah, there were 7 cars actually in there. I mean, and an officer getting shot at, 7 cars in that parking lot, I think that's justifiable. You're going to have lighting conditions if you have 1 or 2 cars. You put our red lights on, or our lights on with the high beams on, stuff like that. There's conditions for everything.
The report is stating that the conditions were created by the very fact that there was that large response.
Right.
Because the
But you can't predict how
the fire that was heard, we only later learned was friendly fire. The inability to see was created by lights with the police cars, and they're suggesting that response in and of itself created potential harm.
But we respond like that to many different places and different times. I mean, our response is like that all the time. I mean, you're going to get multiple cars in one place. I mean, just the incident that happened because the light was on the course. Well, now it's lighting condition. Well, when we go to other places, in the neighborhood, we have 10, 12 cars. Is there lighting conditions there? Same thing. We're trained at night. These guys work at night. They're trained at night. They know what they have as far as equipment and what's going on.
It also sounds like what you're saying is that the way officers are trained and the way that they routinely respond to things are not the way that the city policies are written. I mean, the city policy says only 2 cars should respond. I know you said there's an unusual circumstance, but I was trying to look at cases around the country, and 62 cars is pretty unusual. I mean,
But how many times are a police officer being shot at? I mean, that's a police officer being shot at. And there was also state troopers, there's RTA, there's Bratton also. So we come together, other cities come together. I said, I don't know how many chances, or how many times a police officer's been shot at and we pursued vehicles. You gotta go on safety, and we're going home tonight, and there's too many instances in the past where we haven't gone home, and it's a split decision. There's a car chase at work, guy will come out with a gun and start firing. You never know what's going to happen. We're coming in numbers, and we're going home together.
Jeff, you mentioned the split-second decision. I know the report details one supervisor who took the time to change uniform, get in the car, and go join the chase. And in that case, it doesn't sound like his life was put on the line making that split-second decision to jump in when there was clearly already at that point a number of cars involved and officers.
I don't know about the supervisor, do you?
As far as the sergeant, he was aware of it, and yeah, the sergeant was aware of it, and when he became aware of it, he was in fact putting on his gear and stuff, but he's monitoring the radio at that time and in control of it. And as far as that sergeant controlling it, I think he did a fine job through the whole thing. The next day after the radio tapes were released and everything else, I heard plenty of compliments on how Seaford handled himself over the radio and how everything was handled. That boss several times stepped in and then asked for aviation strips. And then you got to remember, too, that officer involved is also asking, this is serious here, we got a shooter, active shooter, mobile shooter, please keep the airwaves clear. And as far as any other bosses that are alleged to be inactive during that, there's a mentality out there with the sergeants. A sergeant has control of that. The other sergeants aren't going to jump in and take control of that unless they see something that is of danger. Now, through that whole chase, there was never he almost struck a pedestrian. He did hit a pedestrian in the crosswalk. And my hat's off to the patrolmen that blocked those intersections. They did a fine job. And that's where a lot of the cars come into play afterwards. After that intersection's blocked and everything's gone by, they simply hop in and lag behind. If you see most of those footage with the 50 cars going by, that's more like an O.J. Simpson chase where it's pretty slow. There's no high speeds there of 100 miles per hour or anything such as that. Now, when all these officers, what they know in their mind is happening right then and there, which is there's an active shooter that shoots a shot at a policeman, that's what they're thinking, that's what's perceived to be believed at that time, they're not going to let their fellow brothers down. That just is not going to happen. They're gonna be there for them. These things, most of these cases end in bailouts, and now you got possibly 2 suspects with guns running around, and I think it would be a dereliction of duty for them to hold off and not be involved to apprehend these, perceived armed suspects for danger not only to the officers involved, but also the, civilians out there. Any other supervisory questions I could answer?
Jeff, could you talk a little bit about, you made some pretty strong comments about the chief. How, from the union's perspective, should the police chief handle this from the get-go?
You should wait till all the facts come in. It's simple. Just take a step back, wait till all the facts come in. You'll show a little support to the officers, or show a lot of support to the officers, and get it out to the public right. I don't think we're here, if he doesn't give that statement, I don't think we're here like this today. Well, maybe we are now, but we're not here, over the last few weeks. So you guys learn to take a step back and get the facts. You don't get the facts in 5, 6, 7, 8 hours when none of our officers have given a statement to anybody. You don't know what they were going through. That was pure hell for them. The emotions ran, and hopefully you guys get the BCI's tape someday. You watch what the emotions are in these guys. These are seasoned veterans that do their job, they come to the job, they go home, they go to their families. They're not coming to do what they had to do that night, but they're sworn to do it, and they did their job that day.
Can you talk about what support from the city is lacking? I know there's been talk about stop sticks, aviation, and then also support for the officers afterwards that's supposed to be provided that may not have been.
Well, it's kind of funny, the sticks, I went to the 2nd District the other day, and that's where it was initiated from. I found them both. One was upstairs, one was in the car, but they're both broken right now. And they're both broken and they're not functioning, and the company that services them has gone out of business about 2-3 years ago. So we're not up to date on equipment. Why only have 2? Why only have 13 in the city? I mean, we give money back every year in the contracts to say, let's buy more equipment. And the mayor says they give. Well, keep giving. Let's get up to the 2000s, not the 90s. As far as the support after, the support after, there wasn't much support. The chief had a chaplain come down, and he was assigned. We used to have Dr. Tenrovich, and she was there forever. Our nickname was Red. She was a great lady for everybody to go talk to. It was always in confidence, and she was just a great person. Right now, we don't have anybody, and we haven't had anybody for a while. And we have a chaplain that sometimes likes to be a detective and ask questions, on what's going on with the event, and instead of knowing how you're doing and what can I do for you. That's how the beginning of this went. After the fact, I think he saw that he needed to give these guys a little bit more support. But to this day, and I don't know who's out there, but I don't think the chief has contacted any of our officers yet. I mean, there's enough contacting the public and the Justice Department, but what about our officers?
The mayor told us that the funds are there to give the department everything it needs. If that's true, what's happening to these funds to provide for things like the stop sticks and...
I'm not sure I'm 100% correct, but I think it goes right back into the general fund. I think we put money back into the general fund when we have money left over.
Jeff, you talked about the rush to judgment by this panel made up by the chief of police. Specifically, what has been said to the officers that were involved in this, and who is saying it to them?
You know what, it's officers tell me what other people are saying, so I'd rather not get in who's saying what out of the panel. But members of the panel have told these guys they're getting suspended, demoted. People might lose their jobs over this. I mean, it was very one-sided, and I'm hearing this 2, 3, 4 weeks ago before any tapes or any interviews are completed by us.
Jeff, we've all had a chance to look at some of the information that came out, because there's a lot from BCI. Is there anything in there that you wish didn't happen, or that there were any mistakes made between the time we heard what sounded like gunshots and the time we entered the parking lot? Because that sort of becomes a different situation when we're dealing with cops on the scene and a car coming in. But prior to that, between those 2 points, is there anything that anybody did wrong? Police officer action.
Police officers, I was going to get into the suspects didn't stop. I understand, I mean, you know, why is it turn on, why is it, all right, but why is it turn on us?
Legitimate based on
Okay, I understand.
information that's out. Is there anything in there that
All right.
is accurate in terms of its portrayal?
But how do you turn that on us to be the bad guys? We weren't the bad, we were the police. I know,
Make the suggestion that there, was systematic failure and a lot of emotion that got in the way of making accurate descriptions of what was happening. I'm just asking, do you think there's anything in those 2 points prior to the gun, or the car coming at officers, that should have been different, could have been different?
no, because you have, if you go through the whole incident, you got the shots fired downtown. You have them pointing a gun, you have, I think at that point, almost trying to ram a police car, reloading a weapon, speeds from 60 to 100, to the deadly force into the parking lot where the one suspect is looking like she has a gun. The vehicle comes back at that officer where he's in fear for his life. The vehicle doesn't stop there after maybe a couple shots. Maybe a couple shots should have stopped him and warned him. Even way back when, before all this, it should have stopped. And then the vehicle still goes after other officers. So these officers did the job they had to do that day because of the circumstances that were put on them. And it's all by the suspect's actions.
Jeff, the Attorney General said the system failed you guys. Based on what you're saying here today, do you believe that the system failed you? I'm hearing defense of the different points that the Attorney General made where it failed you, but it seems like, you defend it. So you're feeling to what he said in regards to that.
The system failed us. The officers went out there with the equipment we have, and they did the job best the way they could with the stuff they had that night. The system, meaning equipment, stuff like that, maybe?
Training. It's got to be instinctual.
Well, that training is a whole different thing. I mean, we have more classroom training than physical driving and stuff like that. Our training can always be better. Get us out of the classroom, get us in these kind of situations, as far as chases and stuff like that. Get us out of the classroom. There's some things for the classroom, but our job is all in the field. It's all hands-on. We're going to the bad guys, and we're going to help the good people out there. And then we get resistance on people that are defiant to us.
Are you hearing other departments train that way as well, or?
I don't know. The one thing is, the pit maneuvers. Why don't we have those now? Why don't we train for that? That might have stopped this chase way in the beginning, and that's used statewide. We had to get up with the 2000s on our training. As far as what's out there, as far as equipment for us to use for our safety.
Jeff, the police chief talked with today, and he said he's not concerned about the union's news conferences and believes most officers in their heart do the job to protect and serve. Can you respond to that?
That's half right. We're still going out there doing our jobs. There are 5 districts, there are 2 shifts going out there. These guys love their job, they're going out there, they're answering runs, they're coming to help the citizens out there. No matter what people think of us, we're still going out there doing our jobs. You should be concerned because the morale is an all-time low right now. And officers are second-guessing what they're doing out there because they're afraid of administration.
Jeff, the Attorney General also said that supervisors should have played a better role in maintaining control of the chase. Do you agree with that?
Well, yeah, I'll let Brian answer, but all those supervisors that were in that chase, I know personally. They were good officers before, they're good officers now. They participated in that chase, and they were faced with the same circumstances that we were, and I support every one of them also.
Yeah, and if you've had the opportunity to listen to any of the tapes, all 5 channels, specifically Channel 2, which was the most airtime for 22 minutes involved in that chase, I don't think there's a supervisor out there that says that the sergeant that was in control of that chase did anything wrong, even days later, even up to this point right now. All our supervisors support what that sergeant did entirely. And if you listen to it, even just a common citizen listen to it, you didn't hear anything out of control as far as a pedestrian struck or anything wild and out of control that showed imminent danger to where somebody better step in and stop this thing. And then you also have to weigh the balance of how the seriousness of this. It's the extreme circumstance here, an officer being perceived to be shot at.
But the Attorney General also said that the supervisor was not aware of how many cars were involved in the chase.
And that would be a correct statement by that supervisor, and mainly because he's in his car trying to catch up to where they are, hearing where it's at and everything else. he doesn't have the capability to log and see ADLs and see how many cars might have jumped in or what have you, and his cars. You know, that would only be for his cars as well. If there's other districts, he's not going to be able to see that as well. So he was only in control of what he could hear going on. Like I said, he didn't hear any recklessness or anything else. Everything seemed fairly controlled. Good commands were being relayed to him and everything else. And then several of the bosses that were on the scene that might have seen the chase going past them and everything, I can't relate who they are or too much of their statements, but a lot of it's coming back that they heard what he was ordering over the air and how he was monitoring, and while they're monitoring and they've seen parts of the chase, they didn't see anything out of the ordinary danger-wise to put a stop to that or to notify him that, hey, something's wrong here, are you aware of that? And back to, DeWine, I got to say this, he released a statement. One, it's kind of odd. Never before have I seen an investigative unit hold a news conference and release facts before he's going to convey it to the prosecutor to render a decision. Now, I know that him and McGinty were in cahoots with that and in agreement with it, and part of it's because this has been so sensationalized, okay? The public wants to know quick, the media wants to know. In this day of Facebook and Twitter and social media, we're getting beyond some of the facts here of the importance of let's get everything out there. He opened up his statement by saying that the BCI is tasked with gathering the facts and not rendering any opinions or recommendations, when in fact the last part of his statements was entirely throwing the City of Cleveland, the Division of Police, and everybody under the bus with his opinions and recommendations, to be honest with you.
And the impact on the overall investigation, in your opinion, by this statement?
Well, it could be damaging to both Jeff and I as we go forward representing our officers in discipline coming up, to be honest with you. And to be honest with you, these family members of the two deceased, we already know they're probably going to come after the city and sue. I wouldn't doubt it if they got an attorney the very next day. But I think that some of his words add to damaging the city's legalities as well.
Brian, we've got a lot of information from DeWine. What are some of the facts that you seem to suggest that we haven't heard yet, or it hasn't all come out? I mean, we've seen all the statements, we've read them, we are looking at the tapes, because I do think it conveys the emotional impact of what the folks were going through.
Right.
But what are we missing?
I don't know that you're missing too much. There's going to be another part of this. We've been through stages of when there's been news conferences and releases, and a lot of them, quite frankly, like by the city, they've held several news conferences simply to tell you that it's ongoing. And it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction to a news conference that some of those family members might have given the day before. So there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction on their part to just let the eminent know that we're still going forward and going to investigate this. There's no doubt in my mind as we go into this, as far as, policies and procedures are concerned, obviously when my members give their statements and everything, they're going to be held to explain some of their actions and or inactions, okay? And once they get that opportunity, the chief or whoever the hearing officer is, or this panel when they interview them, they're going to determine are those excuses good enough. Because, you have GPOs, they are general police orders. But a lot of times some of them are, for instance, guidelines on how to go forward and handle something. Certain times things get totally out of control and the unexpected occurs. And that's why you see constant changes in policies sometimes every couple of years to update that, because you have a sensational event like this. I ask you, when was the last time that we had a situation like this? I had asked Ed Gallick this yesterday. I go, when can you tell me that we had a police chase and a shooting like this and that we could compare this to and how it's happened? This is almost like a perfect storm, once-in-a-lifetime thing that happened. And now Jeff and I are tasked with representing our members the right way and going forward. And in doing so, we support both the supervisors and the patrolmen in their actions during this event.
It still does sound like there's some kind of fundamental disagreement between you guys and the city on what the rules should be. I mean, I know, Jeff, you keep mentioning this unusual circumstance, but if you read through the policy, there's something that it doesn't say if there's an unusual circumstance, none of the policy applies. You don't have to ask the supervisor for permission. As many cars as one is doing should join. I mean, so I feel like is there going to be a way that gets fixed? Because otherwise you guys are going to continue to disagree, and they then, in theory, could continue to discipline your folks for doing what they're going to do.
And one thing that comes up is the two-car thing is a big issue with the media asking the likes of Jeff and I and everybody else involved in this. And as far as that two-car rule, I mean, you got that line that says unless unusual circumstances and you could articulate the correct way or whatever. That being said, this is the most unusual circumstance we have with an active shooter proceeding to shoot at two policemen outside. It don't get no more ordinary than, unordinary than that. As far as that goes, you know, policies, that's why they do change. They might have to correct that language. Another thing, there's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacks coming after us the day after and continues on. When a patrolman takes a sergeant test, a sergeant takes a lieutenant test, you take this exam, you got 200 questions you're going to answer or so, you got multiple choice A, B, C, and D. If there was a policy on this thing with the two cars and the pursuit, and that was one of your main questions, you've got a couple minutes here to scratch your head, wonder, process of elimination, I think it's C, and take your time doing so. These guys had split-second decisions to be made, including the boss, on allowing it or not allowing it to go. So, judging somebody the day after and so forth, and then months later during disciplinary hearings and everything else, they're not taking that into account. And that's mine and Jeff's job to bring that up to them and hope that they understand that. And that's all we can hope for. I've been through plenty of discipline hearings the last 7 years now. There's a lot of times where we go and we felt that our member was explained of his actions wholeheartedly. We come out of there, 2 days later, we find out he's getting a 3-day suspension, and we just can't even believe it. But that's the nature that we live in.
Isn't the split-second decision always the right one?
What's that?
Under that theory, is split-second decision always the right one?
I would hope so. In this case, I think that it was. I think everybody acted properly here.
Jeff or Brian, given the highly sensational and public nature of this case, what you call it, how would you like to proceed with draft acts in regards to appeasing the public hungry for information and the city administration and you guys? What's the best thing you could have done?
I missed it, but I mean, when the DCI cleared, I believe, that scene about 12, 1 or 2, between 12 and 2 o'clock the next day. The press release was by what he made us from around 7, 8 o'clock. He hasn't talked to anybody. He doesn't know what the people that use the deadly force said. It could have been something more, hey, I'm still gathering facts. I'll let you know when we get an update.
And behind your guys.
And also,
and support them.
and I'll pivot off of Jeff's take there. You know, I would expect, you know, I've heard a lot of complaints from my membership as well regarding, you know, the feeling of the administration throwing them under the bus and so forth. I would expect the administration to come forward and say, hey, we had a terrible incident that happened the previous night. It's under investigation. There are things that we can and can't release at this time, but we do stand behind our officers until we learn otherwise and go forward with it and back your officers. That's the main thing.
No, just real quick, I mean, in this pursuit, we also have an active shooter policy also. I mean, I find that this, you know, a police officer being shot at downtown, there is an active shooter, and that thought was running among a lot of officers. So you have the active shooter, you have the pursuit policy, and like I said, we have not had this situation in ages going towards this vehicle, through a 20-25 mile chase, through the officers hearing the radio dispatch, through the pointing a gun at the officers, what they perceive to be a gun. So this is what we had throughout the whole chase. And then they never stopped. And that word has been big. They should have stopped. It should have been over with, but it went to the parking lot. They didn't stop when he went after Patrolman Diaz. Didn't stop there. He went all the way over and tried to get out, ran me another police car at between 15 and 25 miles in a school parking lot. That's pretty fast in a parking lot.
Do you have any responsibility, you think, with the public safety director, Marty Platt, in all of this, or not?
I'm sorry to hear that.
Do you think there's any responsibility to be held with Marty Platt, the public safety director of the city, or not?
I'm concentrating on chief right now. Let's start one thing at a time.
That'll be a long down the line, Scott, as far as disciplinary hearing. Like I said, this is going in waves here. You're going to be back here with me and Jeff probably in May, June, July, August, whenever the administrative part's done. And there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to be attending some disciplinary hearings out of it. I'm sure of it. This just isn't going to go away. I know. So down the road then, we'll see what kind of punishment is administered, and we'll be quite vocal if we see any terminations, any demotions over this or anything. I can tell you right now, what we know, sitting through all these interviews so far, there should be no demotions or terminations in this case at all.
Or suspensions or reprimand. These guys made sure throughout that whole chase that everybody was safe, everybody went home, civilians, and I think people miss that a car that's going between 50 and 100 miles per hour throughout the whole city, nobody else got hurt. That commends our officers and how they block the intersections and let everybody else get through. If that car, one of our police officers would have hit another vehicle and God forbid killed somebody else that was innocent in that, then we're here on a totally different thing. This didn't happen because they're trained professionals and they know how to do their job.
What if some of the officers in the lot did that go down because of?
What if? Yeah, what if?
What if?
Yeah, what if?
You know what, luckily,
What would you be saying then?
Yeah, we don't want it.
I
don't want it.
I can't go with the what if.
To be honest with you, just the act of them trying to is just as bad as one of our officers letting it go, period.
And we're lucky that day there was so much crossfire, we're lucky that nobody else did it. I mean, there's another 90 bullets out there that didn't aren't accounted for.
What if they would have called over?
So, you also gotta ask me, what if we would stop pursuing? You know, when we stop pursuing, the bad guys don't stop. They think they're still being pursued, they keep going. And there's been instances where we'll stop pursuing 2, 3, 4 miles, they're cracking up in their car and showing something else like that. I mean, it's our job to bring them to justice. Anything else?
If anybody needs my business card from the media, we can press it on.
All right, thank you very much. We support these officers, we love them.